Well, good morning. And as usual, we meet again. Uh, Yesterday, I talked about community, and that's the beginning of a much longer topic that I'm sure we'll go into as time goes on. But I found that, as I talked about community and the dissonances and disconnections I feel in various spiritual community groups, because they're all based on different systems, right? The Vedic system, the Buddhist system, the Christian system. I mean, even the castaneda system, you know what I mean? And the further I got into castaneda, the more systematic it became, and the more challenging it was for me to adhere to all of its tenets, as they were alive in my life. But yesterday I started throwing some terms around that I feel that I should explain what I understand of them, just to be clear what I'm talking about. They're things that I've kind of maybe touched on before in different posts, and they constitute a living knowledge for me because describing it is a way of demonstrating my understanding, and I've always delighted in a strange way in understanding things. I can't explain it. I just get a tickle out of understanding what I'm going through. So a couple things I said yesterday. The main piece was the assemblage point that comes from Carlos Castaneda. Assemblage point. What I want to do is just describe that a little bit and then delve into another aspect that I've talked about before, which I'm going to talk about again in order to make sense out of the assemblage point. So again, this is only my understanding. So anyone who studies castaneda who may watch this someday, if you disagree, God damn, let me know. I'm curious about the true meaning of, and by meaning I mean the true realization of these perceptions, I guess, because it does come down to perception in the end for Castaneda and his system that he learned from Don Juan, who was a local North American Yaqui Indian shaman, basically. And so what I love also about these stories is that they represent the meeting of a Western academic with a North American indigenous person, and the knowledge that he learns from this indigenous person is I think, important and also figurative in a way, because here on the coast, even in Victoria, these days much of our social endeavor is to come to grips with the violent displacement of the indigenous peoples here, and what is that dialogue look like, Huge topic. Don't really want to get into it here, but just that's an aspect of these books that also touches me, because it resonates so many levels for me. And on that level, as a cultural meeting, it really resonates with me. But anyway, the assemblage point. So, essentially, this Toltec system, which is what they're describing, the new seers is what Don Juan was. The essential perception is that we are a bubble of energy, and that these bodies are, and in fact, the entire physical universe that we perceive and can know is a particular description of energy flow, and that these new seers determine through their seeing is not a product of the eyes, although it starts with the eyes. There's a sort of a beckoning which the eyes do, but it's a total body perception that has nothing to do with sight. So the total body perception has got something to do with silence, stillness, and stillness has got to do with this reality of us being energy bubbles, luminous energy bubbles, basically. And so we're a luminous energy bubble. And what they observe is that our awareness is the result of this shining ball of intense brightness that they discovered between the shoulder blades behind our backs. To the left, they say, in most normal people, but basically behind us in the energy cocoon, the energy bubble, the energy cocoon. And this assemblage point where it is where, we're an energy bubble. This is bright point of illumination called the assemblage point just behind our shoulders. But what the cocoon is made of is an infinity of energy fibers. And what the universe is made up of on the outside of the cocoon is an infinity of luminous fibers. So you've just got this reality of energy fields. Fields within fields within fields within fields, fibers within fibers, bundles of fibers of light. And the world that we perceive is the alignment of energy fields of our cocoon with energy fields of the outside universe that are aligned at the assemblage point. It's the assemblage point that aligns these inner and outer threads of energy. And in the process of aligning, we perceive the world, this world, say. This world is the result of a place where our assemblage point is fixated. And it's fixated there because of our upbringing, because of our conditioning. And so that's the basic essence of what perception is. They say as well that when they observe C, which is to say that essential whole body perceptive unit of energy being, the energy luminosity, when it perceives, it is seeing, which is not to do with the eyes, it's got something to do with this energy body, which is only realizable in silence. When you're asleep, they see that the assemblage point moves to different places in the luminous sphere. And so they determine that when you're dreaming at night, the perceptions you have of these worlds are the result of a movement of this assemblage point, which is aligning different bundles of energy fibers inside your cocoon with different bundles of energy fibers on the outside of your cocoon. And so because of that, they realized that the assemblage point can move. And so the two basic techniques of sorcery, the first is dreaming, because dreaming is how the assemblage point moves. So dreaming is about waking up and being aware of where your assemblage point is moving. We cannot control the movement of the assemblage point. It just moves on its own. However, we can stop it, or we can anchor it. We can fixate it in particular spots, and we can fixate it by a separate technique called stalking, which is an unfortunate term in our day and age, but it essentially means the control of your behavior, the minute control of your behavior, almost like performance or acting, but in a very extreme way. And so, a basic concept might be, in sleep, if you're aware, your assemblage point moves, you're seeing a different world, a different universe, if you will, and your ability to sustain that view is the effectiveness of your ability to pay attention to it, and then to stalk yourself, to control your behavior at that point so that you don't move it or disrupt your perceptive unit. So that's essentially, in the most cursory description, kind of what assemblage point is. And so the thing is it's seen as this very different way of looking at the world around us. Now I'm going to veer into some other descriptions here in order to make sense of like the world that the assemblage point can assemble for us. So they've got two concepts. Again, this is Don Juan's Toltec knowledge. It's two concepts. There's the tonal and the nawal. These are two aspects. The tonal is the totality of everything we can see, taste, touch, hear, feel, taste, you know what I mean? Every sense, right? Every feeling we have, everything we can describe in words, everything that is knowable, including the unknown, which we can perceive. All of this is the tonal. Everything that's knowable and distillable into descriptive knowledge is the tonal. And it is infinite. It is infinite. So not only the world of everything we can describe, but the cosmos, the universe, is simply the tonal. Our idea of evolution is the tonal. So the tonal is a description. It's an inventory, is what they would say, an inventory of descriptive elements that we learn. And the process of being raised in a particular culture is the process of being taught the inventory of that description. And so in our world right now, we have different kinds of tonal in different cultures maybe, but essentially it's all the same basic thing, because we're all in the world, and very few cultures disagree with the picture of the world as this material phenomenon in the cosmos, right? It's factual. All facts are the tonal. The nawal then is everything that we cannot know and cannot touch, see, perceive, feel, or in any way apprehend with our senses, in any way. And yet it's present with us all the time. And it is everything that the tonal exists within. So when I talk about, in earlier posts, the first attention is the tonal, right? And the tonal is where our rationality is. It's where our rationality makes sense of things. It's where facts are, right? Second attention is what happens when the tonal arises in us, which is to say, something else begins to happen. And it's hard to describe because it's indescribable. It's indescribable. And yet it happens. It's one of those paradoxes. And so usually in people, this belief that the tonal, which is to say the entire cosmos that we perceive and is factual to us, is just a description, okay? And so when the assemblage point is moving, it is changing entirely that descriptive unit. And so what moves the assemblage point is the nawal. The nawal is moving the assemblage point. It's just a mystery. It gets moved, They say that the leader of the sorcery party, who is called the nawal, because he's the channeler of the nawal, the unknowable, he can also move the assemblage point. Illness can move the assemblage point. Trauma moves the assemblage point. Any intense jolt can move your assemblage point. And of course, coming from the mental health system, when we look at traumas, we think of getting the person back to who they were, right? And so in a way we're saying, okay, well, here's our descriptive unit, the world. If we're jarred out of that, we got to quickly get that person back into the description. That's the rational and the reasonable response, and that is the essence of healthcare, right? To the sorcerer, they say, when that assemblage point moves, you have the opportunity to perceive other complete universes of reality. And so that we live in this endless infinitude of other realities that he pictures like layers of an onion, So a couple of times ago, I described like the world that we live in on the earth as being like a soap bubble, a round soap bubble. And the thinness of that soap bubble is our reality. And that's true in terms of, atmosphere, light, temperature, geological forces, water, chemical compounds. Like even though the earth is our home, there's only this soap bubble of thinness in which we live on it. And I think that was an expression of what I understand of this onion skin concept of like layers of reality. And so he says that on the earth there's all sorts of other kinds of life living on other layers of existence, and this leads us into the question of inorganic life, as he calls it, and entire other universes of perceptive capacity, which can yield to description, but a different kind of description. So it's freaking mind-blowing. And so talking about moving the assemblage point, or me moving my assemblage point, that is to say, I've broken my conditioning. That is a movement of the assemblage point. But have I ever assembled into the universe? I don't know that. I don't think so. Have I lucid dreamed? Which is a different term to describe dreaming. Dreaming, as a practice, is you become aware of your dreams. And so in a way, it's not like the awareness of the everyday world, first attention being the tonal, second attention being the nawal. It's about your aliveness. Your awareness comes awake in a different way in dreams. I've been awake in a couple of dreams over the years, over the many, many years practicing this, but I can't do it with any regularity, and I can't do it like on command. Sometimes it happens, and most of the time it doesn't. Not to my awareness anyway. And that's the essence of it. You become aware that you're dreaming, and then it's like, let me try to break that open. When you're dreaming, the dream's got a narrative, much like the everyday world's got a narrative. And while you stay in the narrative, you stay stuck into a particular focused, limited awareness. So when you're becoming awake in a dream, it's like you step out of the narrative in some way. You just look at things in a different way. And the way you're supposed to practice dreaming is to just, first of all, look at something, your hands or whatever it might be, something that's always going to be you. And then you start looking at other things in the dream in glances, because if you look too long, the dream's going to change. And so what you got to do is always return to your hands and then look at things in order to develop your dreaming attention, your ability to stay aware of what you're observing. And when you do that, there's no narrative anymore. You're just doing something different. You are being aware of being in a dream. And so after that, when your dreaming attention improves, then it becomes a matter of like that stalking element where you're controlling your behavior in the dream to achieve certain results, whatever that might be. So, ultimately, the assemblage point then, the theory of the assemblage point is to say all facts, all evolution, everything that's perceivable, everything that's of our body, everything, every single thing is a byproduct of the assemblage point and is only a description, an inventory of descriptive elements that we have accumulated. And so, when someone like Sadhguru says, we all have karma, karma is simply memory, and so the accumulation of factual experience that we observe in the material universe, I would say that Castaneda would say, well, that's one inventory, and that true reality is being energy and being able to move from that description into any other description you want to. That's the essence of perception. And so, it's quite huge. This I think is why when I come with my mantra, loving, healing, evolving, dreaming, it's a key distinction for me, because loving and healing are like, the loving is the getting to your energy being. And if you can't get there, healing is a going within to heal all those places. Heal your energy body, as it were. Heal your energy. Heal the places inside where you become wounded and damaged. Once you begin to acquire that wholeness, that positive vibration, then you either, in my view, you become an evolving being, which is to say you get involved in our description of the world, evolution, the cosmos, the exploration that I talk about, that's evolutionary, right? And yet it's just a kind of dream. And that dreaming is what happens when we're moving with the know-all, which is to say we allow the know-all to move our lives, and our assemblage points move, and then we can perceive and describe a potential infinitude of other possibilities. Dreaming possibilities is what that he would say. But that dreaming it's not like a subset of this description. It's a completely different description because it's based on energy and our basic reality of being energy that perceives. So that is that kind of sums it up in a way, tonal, know-all, the assemblage point, how we perceive the world around us. And actually, he used a metaphor which is interesting to me to describe what the process of sorcery is. So he imagined the tonal as being an island. And when I sing, I sing in a metaphor of a magic island often, because of course this has really been meaningful for me. And in my life, when I was a little kid, I lived in Bermuda with my parents. And the discovery of Bermuda is like the accidental discovery of this uncharted island. And that always has had real meaning for me. And so when Carlos Castaneda began picturing our total understanding of the cosmos as an island, the island of the tonal, an island that is within the dark sea of awareness that I used the other day, really resonated with me. It's the magic island that we live on, this island in which everything happens, and yet it's just an island. And in the concept of this Toltec wisdom and knowledge, only one island of an infinity of islands in the dark sea of awareness, which is powerful and frightening, actually. Frightening in that it's unsettling when you think that everything we know, everything we can know, is just a product of a description. And that energy being is not even about, your manhood or womanhood or whatever your gender combination is, or anything to do with the familiarity of our human form. Even our human form is just a description. It's a description that's got a lot of power for us, and yet it's still something that at a certain stage, if you pursue these sorcery practices, these Toltec sorcery practices of the new seers, you will lose your human form even. That doesn't say you stop being a person. It just means you stop being attached to being a human. Your energy. Once your energy, everything begins changing. And so it creates kind of detachment from this descriptive world and the island that we're living on. And that process as well, the island of the tonal, one of the main things that you're supposed to do as, a warrior, a sorcerer, anyone who is seeking knowledge, is the recapitulation, which is to say, finding yourself in all the things that have ever happened to you, being aware of your description, all the parts of your description and how they work. And this process is also cleaning and clearing the island of the tonal, clearing and cleaning the island, tidying it up, making it clear. Why? Because of this metaphor that I'm going to describe to you. So you've got this island picture, right? He also he described this moment that his benefactor did with his sorcery party, and they grabbed a table, four-legged table, and a bunch of them carried it out into the heart of the wilderness, hours and hours and hours and hours of like walking out into the endless wilderness of just uncharted Mexican nature there. And then they put the table down in the middle of some totally desolate place. And he said, this table is the island of the tonal. And once it's cleared, which is to say it's organized, you've recapitulated, you've organized all the things you think about, and you understand where all these descriptive elements fit, and you realize that you're not any part of them, and so therefore you can arrange it any way you want. It's cleared. Then the sorcerer lies on the table and looks at the ground beneath the table, because that is the only part of the Nawal, which is everything forever, It's the only part of the nawal that sorcerer can perceive is below the table. And so attention below the table is this metaphoric concept of when we look off the island of the tonal into the unknowable. And there's a certain part of it that we can perceive, and that's the unknown. So in a metaphor, that's kind of how those things fit together. And I realize I'm a talking head on the internet. I'm just babbling about these esoteric metaphysical concepts. And the reason I'm doing it, though, is because yesterday I introduced them all, and I've been throwing around all these concepts and stuff, as we've gone along. And that's what I understand of it. I understand of it. Is that have I assembled a new world in my assemblage point? I don't think I have. I've dreamed a few times, but not consistently. But in terms of like freeing up my energy, doing my recapitulation, healing, and clearing the island of the tonal, I've definitely come a long way in that. And this discipline that I'm doing with you is a part of that. Is a part of it. This is something I'm learning as I'm going along here. As I've said to you, is that by describing this to you, I'm also letting go of it. I'm describing it to you and letting go of it, because that's a process as well. If you constantly hold on to healing, once you're healed, you're indulging a process that you no longer need for some other reason. And so I am going through this healing journey because I know that by continuing to go through it, and it is a repetition, eventually I will come to a place where healing is like the smooth running of a beautifully maintained engine or something. Everything is metaphorized. The moment you come to this energy reality, metaphor is the only way to go. The only way you can just describe it metaphorically, because the words are, you're consciously acknowledging that your words are pointing to something that you can't really describe because it's energy and it's silence. This is another reason why I love acceptance and commitment therapy. I was mentioning that yesterday, is because they recognize the power of metaphor for the same reason that like, if you're stuck in the cognitive fusion, when you start breaking it open, you still have to use the cognitive process to understand what you're going through. But metaphors, because they're open-ended and because they're artistic in nature, they can point to things that we can't say rationally. And so they're very useful as learning and healing tools, very useful in learning and healing tools. And I've always been an active and passionate metaphorizer of experience. And so, there it is. So, assemblage point, a real esoteric concept and theory. And yet it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. And I suppose it's one of those things which is part of the reason why I'm always leery of systems, because I have been practicing it. I've been living this assemblage point. I've been living tonal and nawal. I've been living silent knowledge. Oh, and here's another piece. So there's two positions of the assemblage point, shall we say. Okay, there's a multitude, but there's two essential positions that start the whole show. And one is the place of rationality and reason. And it is the place where we assemble the familiar world of facts, right? When we're there, there's another place, and we can see it from the place of reason. It is the place of silent knowledge. And how we get there is a one-way bridge called pure understanding, which is to say, you go within, you get silent, your loving energy being is active and alive. Your aliveness, which is that place that really is the flow of your true life, and your mind and everything it can conceive is just a passenger in that journey, right? That aliveness is pure understanding, is silent knowledge. Once you're in silent knowledge, that's another place of the assemblage point. And from the place of silent knowledge, you can perceive the place of reason. And how you get there is by concern about how you can know what you know. So there you are in your silent knowledge. You know everything. You are everything. you are God, you're Brahman, you're Atman, whatever you want to call it, like whatever concept on the island of the tonal, if you will, you want to use, silent knowledge is pure energy being. And concern then is the second one-way bridge that takes us from pure understanding to the place of reason, where we understand things rationally. And they're two one-way bridges, they're called. It goes one way and goes the other way. This is a movement of the assemblage point. And when I was younger, I could never get there because I was all stuck in the place of reason. Reason being a subset of how stuck my assemblage point was. Stuck and being unable to see things clearly because there's a certain amount of conditioning that it could not overcome. Then Nawal came to me, moved my assemblage point, and it had been moved many times before, but in my stupidity and my stuckness, I was unable to keep the new position, and just moved me into energy being. And that became the practice of going back and forth, you know? And so even coming here to you, it's like as I live my life out here in the world that I'm living in, a lot of the times I'm striving for that silent knowledge, that energy being, that healing is releasing and opening inside of me. And when I come to you and describe it, I am moving my assemblage point to the place of reason to talk to you about it. But what I'm referring to is something that I can't talk about. Paradoxical, but that's the way it is. And it's interesting then because, you know, this comes up in the context of community. Yesterday I was talking about community, and I want to talk a lot more about that. But the key, I think, is to set this groundwork today, because this world of description that we live in, to be a dreamer is to acknowledge that even this seeming solidity and reality is just a piece of infinity, a speck. You know, the universe that evolutionarily we are going to discover, because we look at this world that we live in, and like yesterday I was saying, you know, we're the embodied creations of cells. You know, that's the description of this universe that we're living in, and if we follow the knowledge of being energy beings with an assemblage point, that's one island in an infinity of islands that we can travel to or create, visualize through the movement of our assemblage point, through dreaming, in other words. And so when I talk about community, I'm going to be talking a lot about dreaming, because dreaming, visualizing is what we need right now. No one can visualize anything in this world that we're living in this corrupt and collapsing society that we're living in. As a culture, we are suffering from a distinct lack of vision, of visualizing the right and true way to live and how to live well, and not just for ourselves, but for everybody, you know, as earth beings. And yet earth beings, that concept is a subsidiary of the description of the material universe that we're living in. So, you know, as energy, then it just creates a very awe-striking perspective on anything we may talk about, especially dreaming, because dreaming is the gateway into endless reality, endless realities, of which this endless reality is just one piece, this ever-unfolding world of light and life and matter and bodies that we live in. No matter how sensible it is a description. And therefore, as energy, we gain a perspective on it. And we can assemble through our assemblage point an infinitude of other realities, if we want to, if we can, if we can unleash our visualization, or maybe from silence and true visualization, we can visualize the best possible way to live our life on this planet. And I think that is something that we need to do. I think that is the function of any community, any positive community, is to ally and bring together all of our individuality and experience, everything we can possibly bring in order to create maximum joy and harmony for everybody who lives here. So it's a global community, an earth community that I feel we've got to cultivate. But how to get there? Wading through this endless morass of conditioning and closed-mindedness, ignorance and self-importance, and all the negatives, evil that we can put out there. You know what I mean? To describe everything that's wrong in our society, in the world right now. So, community has led me to this. Yeah. So ponder these things, and I shall return. Until then, stay disciplined and keep reaching.